Hello, good people of YouTube. Sealord here, and today I am discussing a topic that was brought up at CarrierCon. For those of you that don't know, I attended CarrierCon this previous weekend aboard the Hornet in Alameda, California, and at the event there was a Warships content creator panel where myself and Raptor, who if you don't know who he is, he's a very excellent content creator. He streams over on Twitch. If you want to follow him, please head over there and check him out. Excellent guy. We got to hang out a bit during and before the event. And on this panel with myself and Raptor, he brought up this topic that we're going to discuss today. I think it's a very relevant topic and something that wargaming certainly needs to address, although given how far we've gone down the rabbit hole so far, I'm not really sure exactly what they can do. But I want to elaborate on this topic that C-Raptor brought up, and that is the absolute just murder that's occurred to Tier 9 in terms of its enjoyment and, well, what it once was. So the question that prompted this discussion was, what is one ship that has been done dirty by wargaming after its release? I said the Shikishima, and C-Raptor said, well, not just one ship, but all of Tier 9, because of the direction that the game has gone in. And he brought up some pretty good points. We're going to touch on some of those, and I'm going to elaborate upon that with my thoughts on this as well. So if you guys wouldn't mind, if you do find yourself enjoying this video, make sure to drop a like and leave a comment before you click off of it. It helps on the YouTube side of things. And if you really enjoy it, why not subscribe as well, and make sure you have your notifications turned on. So let's go ahead and get into it. So, Tier 9, what made Tier 9 good? Well, when you got to Tier 9, when you would grind back in the day, it was like you were finally done getting double up-tiered. I mean, who here enjoys getting double up-tiered? If you don't know what that means, double up-tiering is what happens when once you hit Tier 5, you can get double up-tiered. It's when your ship gets put in a match that is 2 tiers higher than yours, meaning that those ships that you are fighting are of 2 tiers higher than you. So let's say you're grinding through the New York, and you get put into a match with Tier 7 ships. Well, you and your New York that only goes 20 knots now has to fight Tier 7 ships, which is the likes of the Scharnhorst, which can rock and roll at 30 plus knots with 15-inch guns. Now, granted, they probably won't hit you because of how German guns are, but you get the idea. When you get double up tiered, you are normally definitely facing a pretty tough uphill battle, especially when we're talking about mid-tier ships. Like Tier 5 to Tier 7 is some of the roughest double up tiering that you can see. And this definitely varies by class, in my opinion. Battleships and cruisers have it a lot tougher than destroyers, because destroyers can still be stealthy, they can still do spotting damage, which, as you were watching this video, the update's going live to where that's now the same as damage when it comes to the economic income of your performance. So battleships and cruisers tend to have it a bit rougher. Cruisers are a little bit more okay because they have HE and usually better DPM than battleships, so they can kind of still hang in the fight. CVs, in my opinion, are one of the worst ships to be double up tiered in, especially if you're in like a Tier 6 CV and get thrown into a Tier 8 game, because the AA performance dramatically increases from Tier 5 to Tier 6 and to Tier 7, and especially when you get to like Tier 8 to Tier 10, that is a rough up tier for most CVs unless you're playing one of the busted ones. So it's typically a very bad time for you in the lower tier ships. Again, there's some ships that do up tier better than others when it comes to individual ships within that class, but typically it's a pretty miserable experience. And the same is, of course, true from Tier 5 to Tier 7, Tier 6 to Tier 8, and Tier 7 to Tier 9, which, in my opinion, used to be the roughest double-up tier in the game. But once you finally got through that painful mid-tier grind, and you were finally in higher tiers, Tier 8 to Tier 10, it's still a pretty big jump, but at that point, it's less of a pain, because typically at Tier 8, most of the lines, their higher tier ships, they're starting to become more beta, if you will. I know it's not proper English, it's just meant to be funny. But at that point, like, let's take battleships for example. I can talk most about those. Well, talk about those with the most authority. You finally get 32mm of plating on most of your mainline battleships, unless you're playing like a battle cruiser or something like that, which means that you can now face tank pretty much every caliber in the game except for 18-inch and above, which of course back in the day meant that everything but the Yamato, you could finally face tank that. You can't just get overmatched through the nose like you could if you're playing like a tier 7 battleship and seeing something like a tier 9 battleship. So you finally have that. Most of the destroyers, that's where they start to really get either stealthy or speedy, or their guns really come into their own, or the torpedoes start to come into their own, to where they can compete with their tier 9 and tier 10 counterparts. Are they going to be better than their tier 9 and tier 10 counterparts? No, but you have more of a fighting chance at that point. And then when you got to tier 9, you can't get double up tiered anymore. Finally, after grinding through all of that pain, you get to tier 9, and now you can only be up tiered by 1 tier to tier 10. And the power gap between a tier 9 and a tier 10 ship typically isn't that great. Yes, the tier 10 is better, but it's only marginally better. And the tier 9 is more than well equipped to deal with a tier 10 ship. It might have a little less HP, reload time might be a little bit lower, the guns might be slightly smaller, but it's still more than well enough equipped to handle that tier. So typically tier 9 is where a lot of players would play for a couple of reasons. One, tier 9 ships have a pretty good situation when it comes to the economy. Why? Because your tier 9, like I just said, the power gap between tier 9 and tier 10 is completely manageable. And the way that the game works, when you do damage to a ship that's of a higher tier than you get a bit of a boost to your income. Which means that playing tier 9 tech line ships and doing damage to tier 10 ships, you would get a pretty nice income in terms of credits and XP and such. And then when Wargaming started to release tier 9 premiums, oh boy. You now have a premium ship with a premium economy that gives you a boost to your income, and you're doing damage to tier 10 ships, which again, because the power gap is very manageable, is very easy to do. So, you're getting a nice bit of profit there. On top of that too, if you weren't up tier, you were probably top tier. And it wasn't very uncommon for back in the day tier 9 to be top tier fairly regularly. I'm not saying it's like every other game, but it would happen fairly often that you would be top tier. And yes, it is, of course, seal clubbing, but hey, who doesn't like being top tier and being able to run around in your tier 9 ship and just punch the ever-living daylights out of some tier 7 ships? It's enjoyable. Anyone that tells you different is probably lying. So you had all this going for this tier. It was enjoyable, it was beneficial economically, they're releasing tier 9 premiums fairly regularly for cash and for resources. So what happened to tier 9? Well, super ships happened. Boy, don't we all love super ships here. So super ships were introduced as a temporary game mode. It was a what-if scenario. What if the direction of naval warfare continued to go toward artillery ships rather than aircraft carriers? Even though we have super aircraft carriers, they seem to have lost the plot there a bit. So it was its own like little mode, kind of like a boss battle mode, and players tended to enjoy it. Why? Because you had these massive super ships that were stupidly overpowered, but at the same time too, it was in its own thing. You could do whatever you want because it didn't affect your stats, and it was typically okay in its separate mode, and even I enjoyed it. It was fun to play the super ships that were, again, just ungodly overpowered at the time, to punch the daylights out of some tier 10 and tier 9 ships that we, of course, had grown so accustomed to being the top dogs of the game. But then, super ships were taken from their special game mode and put into random battles. Now, granted, they were nerfed a bit to keep them more in check, but it doesn't really matter because tier 9 ships were never designed to fight this. They were never designed to fight the Satsuma with its 8 20-inch guns and its magic F button that can reduce the dispersion by 30%. They were never designed to fight the Conde with its completely silly and stupid burst mode and the absolute insanity that is the Conde. They were never designed to fight these crazily overpowered ships that, again, by definition and by Wargaming's own description of these ships, these are overpowered ships that you are paying an exorbitant amount of credits in order to play to have that advantage in game. And keep in mind too that the requirements to get a super ship are fairly low. So it doesn't take a whole lot to get these ships. You just mainly have to have the credits in order to be able to get them. And super ships too, they're not very uniformed in like their power level. We have some amazing ones like Satsuma and the Eagle and the Conde, and we have some that are just kind of like, oh, it's okay, like the Clausewitz. Or the, whatever the Soviet DD is, that's literally just an unnerved Khabarovsk. Okay? So now you have to contend with that. Granted, yes, with the economic income, the way that works, if you do damage a super ship, it's tier 11. It's calculated as that in the game's economy, so you are technically earning more money. But when you're in a tier 9 ship and you're having to fight something that's outright broken, it's typically not a fun time. So that happened, and then submarines happened. Now, it's not just Tier 9 that has to deal with submarines, but it adds another layer of frustration on top of the already frustrating state of having to fight super ships. I mean, submarines are very annoying. They, again, it's in the same situation as CVs before the rework. You have a really good submarine commander that can have a big impact on the game, or you can have a submarine commander that doesn't really know what they're doing and have a pretty low impact on the game. Most submarines that I've run across, they run into the annoying but low impact category. I have run across a couple of the really good guys that I guess just watch Das Boot all day or hunt for Red October while they play the game, and they're really good at what they do. But yeah, subs are more frustrated than anything in my opinion. So now your tier 9 experience went from being a pretty enjoyable one where you could enjoy the fruits of your labor and get a pretty nice economic income for your time in the game, to one where you now have to deal with super ships that are outright broken, that your tier was never designed to fight, and submarines on top of that. And then on top of that too, keep in mind, this is a tier where they sold a lot of tier 9 premium ships before super ships or submarines were introduced into the game. And these aren't cheap premiums. These premiums cost you either one or two things: a lot of time or a lot of money. If you want a coal ship, which there's a lot of really good tier 9 coal ships out there today still, it'll take you about 3 months-ish for a coal ship if you just get like your daily coal containers and such. You can, of course, cut this down by participating in certain events and competitive things like ranked or brawls. Sometimes they'll give away coal for those, or of course from the battle pass as well. And you can cut that down a bit, but you're still looking at least a month or two-ish worth of a grind, or at least playing the game in order to get those coal ships or money. These premiums aren't cheap. Now, of course, this is a free-to-play game, so the game's got to make money somehow. But these tier 9 premiums are pretty pricey, at coming in at normally $77 US, which is more than a AAA game is nowadays. And the people that spent this time and spent this money getting these premium ships at tier 9 are now having to deal with super ships. And then that's not even talking about the people that just grinded up to tier 9, the players that just, did it the old-fashioned way. All that time and resources that you spent investing into the game to get to your tier 9 ship like the Iowa, and now you get clapped across the map by a Satsuma, or you get burst down by a Conde, or you get just sent to the Shadow Realm by the Eagle. So it's become a pretty miserable experience. And trying to get a good match in the background for this video was a pretty tough one because of these factors. So what's the answer here? Well, Wargaming seems to be trying to address it. They keep bumping up the cost of super ships. They keep bumping up the cost of their repairs. They keep reducing the amount of credits that they make because, they're really not a rare sight. And Wargaming said they were supposed to be a fairly rare sight in-game after their release, but, it's like every match, there's at least 2 that I've come across. Every now and then, I will get a rare match, either playing tier 10 or tier 9 ships where there are no super ships. Every blue moon. And you know what? That game's actually pretty enjoyable. But that seems to be getting rarer and rarer nowadays. Hopefully it will become true what Wargaming said about the super ships, that they become a rare sight, but I'm not really holding my breath in the future for that. So guys, let me know what you guys think about this topic down below. I just thought it was an interesting topic that Raptor brought up at CarrierCon. Again, go give him a follow over on Twitch or a subscription on his YouTube channel if you wouldn't mind. Hope you guys enjoyed. Have a wonderful Wednesday. Let me know your thoughts on this topic down below. If you did enjoy, again, make sure to drop a like and leave a comment and subscribe to the channel. We're on our way to 50,000 subscribers. Thanks to you guys. We're getting very close to that goal, which is awesome. Hope you guys have a wonderful Wednesday. Hope you guys are enjoying Update 12.2. I'll be checking it out when I get home from work today, checking out the Illinois and my state's desecrated hybrid battleship. And hope to catch you guys in the next one.